So I haven't really used Android in a serious capacity since 2012 when I switched away from a Galaxy S3 to an iPhone 4S, and that is a major story in and of itself, but the long and short of it was that the update process was horrible. I got one update ever for the phone, and it came 3 months into a 2-year contract, and it crippled the performance of the phone. And when Sprint swapped it out, and I did the update again because they thought it was defective and I thought it was defective, it did the exact same thing. It just crippled the performance of the phone. And when they said, let's see if it's maybe just this update and it'll fix itself in the next update, that's when they discovered that that was the last update for the phone, and that if I stayed with that phone, I would have basically all but those 3 months of a 2-year contract to use a phone that was borderline unusable. So as a result, they switched me over to an iPhone 4S, and I really haven't looked back since. But obviously, as the years go on and I do these tech videos, I want to experiment with Android again, and so I picked up a Motorola Razr. And I kind of ran into the same issue. This time around, it didn't cripple the performance of the phone, but it got one update and that was it. And it wasn't the latest version of Android to boot. And just on a side note, I still don't personally understand the whole folding phone thing, like at least this form factor, because it takes up less space in your pocket, but it's so fragile that I wouldn't want to put anything in that pocket anyway. So at that point, why not just get a bigger phone? But that's a rant for a different day. Either way, this got one update just like my S3, and the only saving grace was that I can still use the phone, it didn't cripple the performance. But I mean, obviously this video isn't titled iPhone User Complains About Why They Switched from Android. It's talking about me as an iPhone user retrying Android after 12 years. But I figured if I was going to do this, I wanted to get a couple things right. Number one, I wanted to have the latest version of Android. And as a side option, I wanted to make sure that I was going to get at least one more, if not two more updates for Android. And the big thing for me, the second big thing for me, was that I wanted to get a version of Android and a phone running a version of Android that was considered the version of Android that Google thinks is correct, basically stock Android. But because I don't have big YouTuber money, I can't just go out and drop big bucks on a brand new phone running the latest version of Android. So what I did instead was I went with a Google Pixel 6 Pro. Pretty good deal for its time, has a lot of really good hardware in it, and it's running the latest stock version of Android. Now, just to be clear, this is not a video about the Pixel 6 Pro. I've already done that video, you can check it out over there. This is just the phone I picked because, like I said, it's running the latest version of Android. It's also got a couple updates in its future, which is good. I'm hopefully going to get another version of Android with this, but it also has some specs that were really good for its day and are still pretty good today that let me experience the most of the latest version of stock Android. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how I'm going to do this video. Over the past 3 months, I've been using this phone as an on and off main phone and primarily a work phone for what I do here on YouTube. And over that time, I've taken and distilled down 5 things that I consider positive and 5 things I consider negative about the current state of stock Android 14. So what we're going to do now is start with the positives, because, well, I like starting with positive stuff. So right from the start, the first thing I noticed with Android after having not used it in any major way for so many years was that it has so much polish compared to what I was used to back when I first tried Android, and even from when I tried the Motorola Razr. There's such little attentions to detail, like the fact that when you charge it from the cord, the animation comes up from the bottom, but when you put it on a wireless charger, the animation comes up from the center. It's very nice and just makes the phone feel generally more cohesive. On top of that, the animations for closing apps, opening apps, multitasking, all that kind of stuff with the gesture controls feels really snappy, and with a high refresh rate display like what the Pixel 6 Pro has, it just feels buttery smooth. I never really felt like the phone was hitching or having any issues keeping up with what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. Compared to TouchWiz and even what I was experiencing when I was trying out the Motorola Razr, the polish on the latest version of Android is just super nice. And I'm sure the hardware really plays into it when it comes to how it performs. Like I said, high refresh rate displays really help this, but it was just a really nice surprise considering that I tend to attribute smooth animations and snappy performance with iPhones. So polish was great. The second thing was the camera app. Now, you don't have to tell me that the iPhone camera app is really limited. You can't really change a lot of settings within the camera app. You have to go to the settings app, but the UI for Android's stock camera app is so nice. The way that you can actually change different settings within the camera app without having to leave and go to settings is so nice. And even with all those functions available in the camera app, the UI itself is still really clean. It's something that I would love to see come to the iPhone. I mean, it was mind-blowing when Apple finally let us touch the frame rate that was up in the corner to change the frame rate of video. Imagine if we could actually go in and change more settings. That sure would be nice. But yeah, the Android app has it, and it's so nice. The number of times that I would exit the camera app to go to settings, only to realize that it was in settings and then have my mind blown that I didn't have to leave the camera app in the first place. It's great. And again, this is not a review of the hardware for the Pixel 6 Pro, but the camera is great anyway. I kind of use the Pixel as my go-to photo camera. Not so much for video, here and there, but the app itself makes it easy to switch between them, change the focal lengths, go through and change frame rate, resolution, everything. It's just so great. Third up on my list was actually kind of a surprise for me, because if you were to ask me which phone I would go with for better privacy and security settings, I'd still say iPhone. But in the last few years, and of course in the almost 12 years that I haven't used Android seriously, there have been massive improvements to the control you have over your privacy and security settings. They've done things that I've praised Apple for, like adding indicators for when the camera or the microphone are in use. They have a ton of controls within the settings on what apps can use different functions. And one of my favorite features is actually a scan and clean tool built into the settings. Kind of gimmicky in my opinion, but it's still one of my favorites because I don't have to download another app to scan and clean my phone. The only thing I couldn't find in the settings when it came to privacy, but I hope it's there and maybe I just couldn't find it or that they'll implement it later, is the whole ad tracking thing. I know Google is really just the ad king when it comes to the internet, but there is something sort of gratifying on the iPhone about opening up Facebook and telling it not to track apps and basically telling Mark Zuckerberg to go f*** himself. Hopefully that's a setting that's in there, or if it's not there, it gets added later, but knowing Google and their business strategy, which isn't a bad thing, they're a very ad-focused company, but knowing that, it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't come to the phone. But everything else is so good with privacy and security, so that was a big plus for me. Now, fourth up on the list was the UI design, and this was probably something that was really easy for me to be impressed by because my original experience with Android was, as I mentioned, TouchWiz. And then after that was kind of stock Android, kind of not, on a folding phone, and it looked kind of bland. This is really good. I'm sure some of the things that Android users are going to point out immediately include being able to put your app icons anywhere, which admittedly is a really nice feature. I like having my apps kind of lower down on my phone so that I can get to them pretty quickly, though I will throw a few up towards the top. But not being locked to a grid is kind of nice. And I'm sure the other thing they'll point out, of course, is widgets, which is something that the iPhone recently got. But yeah, I love the widgets. I love the interactivity. I'll admit it too, Android is way ahead on widgets, though hopefully iPhone will pick up, considering that the first experience I had with widgets was on macOS. macOS has had it, and the fact that it's only now recently made it to the iPhone and Android has had it for so long and it's this well matured, yeah, this is great. But aside from those things, what I really liked was the fact that the wallpaper can influence the color of most of the icons on the home screen. That is so cool. If I remember correctly, I think this is called Material U, and I really like it. The only complaint I really had was when widgets would sometimes pick a color that was directly behind it, so it made it really hard to read, or the color was very, very close to the color behind it, and again, made it really hard to read. But aside from that, I loved the way that it would change the color of the icons as you change your wallpapers. And it actually made me kind of frustrated that other apps didn't take advantage of it, like Snapchat or Apple Music, because you have this really nice cohesive wallpaper and icon sort of soup that just looks really nice together, and then you have these two icons that are just there in their own little space. It was weird. I mean, like, you can literally see it here. I have the Apple Music widget up top. I have Apple Music and Snapchat on the home screen, and they just kind of stand out compared to everything else. But overall, I really like this. It's incredible, and obviously a massive step up from TouchWiz. And the last thing I liked with the UI design that actually kind of ties into my number 5 was the Google News feed when you swipe over. That's really nice. I like the fact that I can get up in the morning and scroll through things that I might want to make videos about. It did a really good job and is still doing a really good job of learning what I'm into and what I might want to make videos about. And, well, it ties into number 5. And at number 5 is probably one that a lot of people saw coming. It's the Google Assistant and Google apps in general. Again, trying not to focus on the hardware too much, the Pixel 6 Pro has the Tensor chip, the first Google Tensor chip they made. And it, along with just the general Google services available through the Google Assistant, it makes that Google Assistant scary smart. Definitely light years ahead of Siri when it comes to asking it general or even in-depth questions, and there's other little things all over the OS that just really impress me. One of the things I discovered might actually change part of my workflow for these videos, which is that it can transcribe notes from the Voice Memos app. And what I'm thinking I might try to do is use that to make subtitles for my videos and then just go in and fix some of the things that it might have missed here and there. It's that good. So we'll see. I'm going to experiment with that a little bit more, but it was that good. It really impressed me. And of course, add to that the fact that the Google apps just work better on a Google phone. I've been having issues on my iPhone where the Studio app crashes for some reason, and I can't figure out why. Hopefully they fix it in an update, but it works perfectly fine on the Pixel 6 Pro and stock Android, so go figure. The Google apps work better on a Google operating system. Generally, the Google apps have been great, and again, the Google Assistant is just kind of scary impressive. It makes me worry a little bit about some of my privacy, but it's pretty nice. And again, like I mentioned in the UI design section, having that Google News feed on the main screen to just swipe to and having it do a pretty good job of learning what I'm interested in, that's really convenient. So those were the biggest positives that I found with Android over the last 3 months of using it. And I gotta say, everything on that list was something that I was either anticipating to be kind of okay, but not quite what I was hoping for, or I didn't really have high hopes for. And all of them blew my expectations out of the water. And aside from the few critiques that I threw in there, I had a blast with every single one of the things I put in this list. And I'm sure everybody's gonna have their own opinion. I'm sure maybe something I listed is not a big deal for you, but was a big deal for me, and vice versa. Something I didn't say at all was a huge deal for you, but I didn't really use it a whole lot. It's fine. It's my personal list, but if you want to talk about things that maybe I didn't mention that I should try, maybe head on down to the comments and leave that. And on your way down there, maybe like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. But now it's time to do what I've been postponing. It's time to talk about the negatives. And these are the things that I found most negative with Android 14. Right out of the gate, notifications. iPhones have had a messed up notification center for a while, but at least they stack and every app can kind of have its little stack of mismatched and crazy notes. Having a long list of notifications that are sort of stacked, but not really, and scrolling forever and all that kind of stuff is just, they really need to improve on that. I appreciate having the little icons for the notifications at the top of the screen, and I appreciate seeing sort of a representation of whatever notification I have on the lock screen or the always on display, but they really got to improve the management, the organization. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I played around with the settings a lot, and the best that I could find was to just turn off notifications from certain apps and hope the little dot on the little app icon was enough to get my attention. Which also, I know you'd probably just be completely ripping off the iPhone by doing this, but having those dots have numbers on them would be kind of nice, because if I open up Discord because I see a dot on it and I have one notification, yeah, okay, maybe I could have let that sit for a little while longer, but if I look at it and see that there are 30 notifications, then yeah, maybe I'll open it a little faster, but yeah, there's just a lot of improvement that I think they should probably do to the notification center, especially things like stacking apps and grouping them. But that was one of the biggest things I noticed right out of the gate. The second thing I didn't like is probably something that other iPhone users don't like. I feel like this is a sentiment that a lot of us will share, which is the fact that the lock screen is not super useful. Something I've always liked about iOS is that I can unlock my phone to read notifications on the lock screen, and then if I want to interact with them, I just tap on them and it takes me to the app. And if I don't really care, I can just lock the phone again, and that's that. But also when the phone wakes up and it's not unlocked, it shows you the notifications but doesn't tell you the context, doesn't give you what's within them. With Android, even if the phone is locked and I wake up the screen, I can read the notifications, which is kind of a big security problem. And then if I unlock the phone to interact with the notification, it just dumps me straight to the lock screen, and I gotta pull down the notification shade to find the notification again, and on and on and on. If I wanted to go straight to the app, I have to wake the phone up, don't unlock it, tap the notification so that it then prompts me to unlock the phone. I unlock the phone and it takes me to the app. It's kind of a roundabout way of doing things versus just tapping on the icon once the device is unlocked, but not away from the lock screen, and then I can quickly interact with a notification on the lock screen or I can choose to simply tap on it and go straight into the app as soon as the phone is unlocked. I don't know, I just feel like iPhone users like having a lock screen that's more interactive. Maybe that's just me, or maybe it is every iPhone user, or maybe Android users just don't care because they've never had that option, but yeah, I like to have a lock screen that I can use for more than just a pretty wallpaper and some notifications that tell me what's in the notification without unlocking the phone. Maybe that's just me. Third on my list is something that I've seen people complain about. Apparently it's been an issue for a while with Android, and some companies are working to fix it, but it's still kind of an issue. And that's the way that third-party apps integrate with core functions of the OS. In some of my friend groups, we send messages and photos to one another through Snapchat. It's kind of just a convenient way to get around the whole green bubble, blue bubble crap, and even some of the limitations of sending photos over SMS versus iMessage. But when I do it with my iPhone, it looks great. The photos come straight through because, from everything I understand, it's using the core camera API of the OS. When it comes to Android, and I don't know if it's specifically with Snapchat, I know some apps do this, I don't know if Snapchat still does, but they don't pull the camera API. They basically take pictures of the viewfinder of the camera app because it doesn't integrate directly with the core API. I know Instagram does this, and I basically take pictures outside of the Instagram app or take photos completely separately, send them somewhere else, and then upload them to Instagram if I'm doing anything with the Pixel because, well, Instagram doesn't seem to like to run on anything other than an iPhone anyway, but yeah, it's just a big problem, and I really hope that core function integration with other apps becomes more common with Android, and it seems like companies like Samsung are trying to do that with their cameras and Android and Instagram and that kind of stuff, but yeah, it's still a problem. For now, my workaround until that improves is just to take pictures with the Pixel, then send them through the Google Photos app to my iPhone, and then do whatever I wanted to do with them in social media through the iPhone. Kind of frustrating, but is what it is. Fourth on the list is actually something I can say that I knew was going to be bad going in, but I was hoping had improved, and this was Android Auto. Now, the reason I knew this was going to be bad going in was because I used to install radios for a living, and one of the biggest things that we always had problems with was Android Auto. Whether it was a factory car radio, third-party car radio, didn't matter what it was buggy, it was slow, and I knew that there had been an update, a pretty big update actually, to Android Auto, but still a problem. And this is actually a feature that I could thoroughly test myself while I was using this phone as a daily driver, because one of my cars has an aftermarket radio that supports Android Auto, and the other has a factory head unit with Android Auto included, and both of them had the same issues. Just to list off a few issues so that I'm not sitting here all night, the phone would constantly disconnect from the radio for no reason, even though it was wired directly in. It would stop playing music, even though the app said the music was still playing, and then I would crank the volume, drop the volume, nothing would work until I unplugged and plugged the phone back in. It would literally just close apps in the background for no reason, so I would have the music app or podcasts up with the phone and Android Auto, and then suddenly it would just be back on the home screen with nothing playing. And then my favorite was when I was driving to my sister's and I had the navigation screen up, and the app didn't close, Maps was still there, but it just cleared my navigation route. It just took me back to the main search for where do you want to go, and I had no directions, even though it had been giving me directions for the last hour of driving. I have never experienced something this weird with something like CarPlay or even the factory navigation setup in my car. Neither of them have ever done that, and Android Auto constantly did that. And it pretty much lined up with my experience with Android Auto from when I used to be an install tech for radios. So needs improvement desperately before I would even think about using Android Auto in my car again. I started doing radio installs in 2020, but I was aware of these issues with Android Auto all the way back in 2017 when I was selling radios, and they just haven't improved. So Google, please, I know that you have improved the actual interface, but maybe improve the stability and, don't close out my navigation routes while I'm an hour and a half into a road trip. Thanks. Now, last on my list is probably going to be kind of a contentious one for a lot of people. In fact, I'm sure some people were expecting it to be in my positives, but it's the customization of Android. Now, hold on, hear me out before you go pulling out your pitchforks and torches and burning me at the stake. I really do respect and appreciate how flexible Android can be and how easy it is for people to go in and change things if they genuinely don't like them with their phones. The problem is that it's kind of just always there. And it's really, in my opinion, a bit too easy to go down a rabbit hole of changing things and then not really knowing how to get back to what it was before. Like, I know that you have to actually actively enable things like developer settings, so some stuff you can change, but you really have to know where to go to do it. Other things you can just do it and, well, not really understand how you did it or where you went to do it or how to get back to it. And like, I'm not really coming at this from a novice perspective. I know I haven't used Android in a while, but I am tech savvy enough that I can go in and say, all right, I think I came from here, and in a worst case scenario, I can look it up and find it. But for a lot of people, if they're just buying a phone with Android on it and they go in and change something because they found out how to do it, well, what's to say that they're going to remember how to get back to that change if they want to undo it? I only put this one at my number 5 because not only did I run into it once when it came to changing a theme and then forgetting where to go for the theme changer and then having to look it up. I'll admit it, I did forget where that was and it was a little embarrassing. But I also dealt with a lot of people when I sold phones where they would talk about how they'd never buy an iPhone because there's no customization. You can't do anything with an iPhone and you can do everything with an Android phone. And then they'd come in 2 or 3 weeks later and their phone would be running slow as a slug and there'd be 15 different fonts on the home screen and tons of widget packs and tons of different icon packs on there. And they'd ask why their phone was running so slow. And I'd have to explain to them that, well, sir or madam, it's because you did everything to your Android phone. Don't take this being on my list as a major problem or a major complaint, but it is something that I wish was maybe a toggle option, like you have the developer settings as a toggle option, instead of being something that the average user could stumble into, change because they think it's cool, and then realize they don't want it and forget how to get back, and then they can't change it again. Or they have to look it up or take it to a tech-savvy grandson, nephew, niece, whatever. That's my point. Now, despite the negatives, I am still going to use the Google Pixel 6 Pro as my work phone for this YouTube channel because it is really nice to kind of offload stuff that comes through from this channel and my other channels onto this phone from my iPhone. I can use my iPhone for family and friends, and I can use this specifically for here and for research and for all the kind of stuff that I would normally expect to do on my iPhone for YouTube, but now I can free that up and have a little less stress on the weekends. Because honestly, the positives I listed really sold me on Android. I'm not going to switch over to it as a main phone because I do still like having the ecosystem, and my workflow does benefit from being able to airdrop things quickly, have everything sync together nice and fast from a desktop to a laptop to a tablet. All that stuff's nice, and I'm not going to go into the benefits of the Apple ecosystem versus Google. But for the Google apps that this does really well, for potential phone calls from sponsors, from basically anything that ties directly into this, and the ability to talk about Android like I know what I'm talking about, I'm going to be keeping this, and when Android 15 comes out in beta, hopefully, I will be using it here on this phone, and I'm really excited for the future of Android and getting to experience it firsthand. So, congratulations, Google. Congratulations, Android 14. You have sweetened my opinion on Android after the abysmal experience that I had way back in 2012 with the Galaxy S3. So again, I am super excited for the future of Android to see where it goes, and if things maybe improve a little more, I might try it as a daily driver and not just a work phone. But for now, it is a work phone, and it is still a great phone, and I can understand a bit more why people prefer this over iPhone. But again, I like both, leaning a little more towards iPhone. Either way, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching this video and sitting through it. I know it was a bit longer, but I really wanted to talk about my full experience with Android and what I think about it. And if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. I want to know what you all think. Leave some comments, please. Let me know if you agreed with my list, if there's maybe some things I missed that I should try out, all that stuff down below. And of course, on the way down there, subscribe. I love doing these videos, and I finally made one not talking about why digital is not as good as physical media. So that's a positive, except I just mentioned it. Oh well. Either way, that's been it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.